I woke up to the steady vibration of my phone on the nightstand. It wasn't an alarm, it wasn't a call. Just a string of messages buzzing like an alarm bell. Soft, cold morning light slipped through the curtains. For the first few seconds, I couldn't register anything. My body felt like it had just run a marathon, though I hadn't even left the house. And then it hit me like a slap. Today was my wedding day. My heart pounded against my chest, stirred awake by a mix of excitement and nerves. I reached for the phone, expecting a sweet message from Jason, my fiancé. Maybe something cheesy like, "I can't wait to see you walk down the aisle," or just a red heart emoji. But the name on the screen wasn't Jason. It was Margaret Ellison, his mother. I frowned. Margaret had never texted me unless it was to revise the guest list or complain about flower colors. My hand hovered over the screen. Something twisted in my stomach. Finally, I opened the message. "We've taken the wedding dress. The venue is canceled. Jason knows what's best. Don't make a scene, just accept it." I read it over and over. Each word like a blade. I could barely breathe. My whole body went cold. The room spun. My mind filled with flashes of the dress I had picked 6 months ago hanging in my closet. The fitting appointments. The nights I stayed up until 2 a.m. tweaking the color palette. The quiet conversations with Jason over tea. Planning a whole future. All of it? Shattered. I rushed to the closet. Empty. The garment bag was gone. Even the pearl-toned heels I had ordered from New York had disappeared. I called Jason 3 times. Voicemail. I called Rachel, my maid of honor. No answer. Finally, I dialed Willow and Vine, our wedding venue. A woman picked up, voice cautious. "Good morning, this is Willow and Vine. How can I help you?" "This is Claire Patterson. I'm the bride. I just received a message saying the event was canceled. Is that true?" There was a long pause. Then the woman exhaled. "Yes. Mr. Jason Ellison called early this morning to cancel the reservation. We've tried to follow up for confirmation, but..." I hung up before she could finish. My chest was ready to explode. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I was furious. I threw on jeans and a jacket, no makeup, no mirror check. I grabbed my keys and stormed out. I drove straight to Margaret Ellison's house. Her estate on the outskirts of San Diego was wrapped in electronic fencing and security cameras, but today the gate was open, as if she was expecting me. I hit the brakes in front of her mansion, stepped out, and banged on the massive wooden door 3 times. Before I could knock again, it opened. Margaret stood there, eyes frosty, like she already knew I'd show up. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't ask if I was okay. She simply tilted her head, like watching a child through a tantrum she was already bored of. "You need to calm down, Claire." I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. "Where's my wedding dress?" "You won't be needing it." Jason made his decision. The wedding no longer aligns with the family's direction. I scoffed. "You don't have the right to cancel my wedding. Jason made the call, and frankly, you should be grateful this didn't happen in front of everyone." I didn't reply. I simply turned and walked down the cold stone steps, one by one. Not a word, not a tear. Just the sharp clarity of someone who had been pushed to the edge, and now knew exactly where to strike. I didn't drive home. Instead, I turned toward La Jolla Beach, where our wedding venue Azure Shore sat. I had made the deposit back in February, reviewed every chair, every ribbon, every candle lining the aisle. I needed to see with my own eyes how they had trampled the trust I once held so tightly. The place should have been closed, quiet, maybe a sign out front that read "canceled due to private matters." But no. When I pulled into the parking lot, the soft golden lights were glowing across the courtyard. Cars lined the lot. Guests in beige and blush walked into the reception hall, holding envelopes and gift boxes, smiling, as if nothing was wrong. My heart paused. I pulled into a far corner, left the engine running. A part of me wanted to turn around. The other part, the one now burning, needed to witness it all. I stepped out of the car, adjusted my jacket collar, and walked straight into the venue. No one stopped me. A few nodded hello, one even smiled and said, "Claire, you're a bit late." Late? I gave a faint, hollow smile. Then the ceremony doors opened, and I almost couldn't believe what I saw. Jason, standing at the altar in a dark tuxedo, solemn expression. And beside him, Holly, my best friend. The one who held my hand during fittings, the one who cried when she saw me in my dress, the one who said, "You were born to wear that." And she was wearing it. Every stitch of lace, every beaded detail, her hair pinned up with a silk veil, my satin heels peeking beneath the hem. A perfect replica of me. I walked down the aisle. The murmurs died. Someone stood up. A few began to recognize me. Unease spread like a crack through thin glass. Jason turned. His face drained of color. Calm left his body in an instant. Margaret, seated front row, leapt to her feet, rushed over and blocked my path, hissing. "You don't belong here. This is a private event." I stared directly into her eyes, unblinking. "You sent the message. I just came to see if you still had even a shred of decency left." Holly turned, her hands trembling as she clutched the bouquet. I could see her avoiding my gaze, lips pressed into a tight line. I stepped closer, took out my phone, placed it on the microphone stand. I hit play. "We've taken the wedding dress. The venue is canceled. Jason knows what's best. Don't make a scene." Margaret's voice rang clear through the speakers, a punch to the already stifling air in the room. Murmurs erupted. People turned to each other, disbelief on their faces. Margaret clenched her fists and hissed through her teeth. "Turn it off. This is sabotage." I looked straight at Jason. "Tell him, was this your way of protecting me from trouble?" He said nothing, but the way his eyes darted away was answer enough. I turned to the guests, pulled a folded document from my pocket and held it up. "This is the contract Jason Ellison signed 3 months ago. It states that if either party unilaterally cancels the wedding, they are liable for full reimbursement of all expenses, plus damages for emotional distress if there's proof of intentional harm." I locked eyes with him. Total $72,649. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Camera shutters clicked. Someone whispered, "She really has a contract." Margaret lunged for the paper, but I had already handed it to Daniel, my cousin, an attorney seated in the third row. He nodded and slipped it into his briefcase. "Notarized," I said quietly, "and sent to my legal counsel this morning." I looked back at Jason, then at Holly. "You still want to go through with it?" Holly stepped back. Jason froze, eyes bouncing between me and his mother like a man sinking into the mess he helped create. I took a deep breath, walked up to the altar, the place I was supposed to stand today. Then I turned away, walking slowly out of the scene I had once planned so meticulously, not in shame, but in control. I exited the ceremony into an eerie kind of stillness. No one stopped me, no hand reached out. I moved past stunned faces and raised phones as if the entire room had been drained of sound and weight. But in my mind, every beat rang loud and clear. They expected me to crumble, to vanish in disgrace. But they were wrong. I drove to a quiet cafe in Mission Hills, the same spot where I used to write proposals for my old firm and where I once cried for hours after my father passed away. I pulled out my phone and found the one person I trusted, Derek Wallace, my college classmate, now a civil attorney specializing in contracts and disputes. I texted, "Urgent, need to meet ASAP, not over the phone." He replied in 3 words. "Location, time." We met less than 40 minutes later at a quiet bar tucked behind an old bookstore. He looked the same. Rolled up sleeves, tie stuffed in his pocket, sharp eyes always 3 steps ahead. I told him everything, no sugarcoating, no dodging, from Margaret's text to Holly in my dress, Jason's silence, and the contract he had signed. Derek listened without interrupting, just his pen tapping as he took mental notes. When I finished, he leaned back and exhaled slowly. "Claire, this wasn't just a broken engagement, this was a coordinated takedown." I nodded. "I don't want revenge, I want consequences." Derek tilted his head, his gaze sharpening. "And then we start at the foundation. Margaret is a founding partner of Ellison West Capital, right?" "Yes, she and her late husband built it. Jason is now co-managing." "Good. We won't just go after Jason. We'll make them face corporate liability." We got to work that night. Derek began building the case file, wedding contracts, invoices from Azure Shore, audio recordings, and a list of everyone involved in the planning. I went back through old emails, texts, anything that showed Holly, Margaret, or Jason had known about the bride swap but let me keep paying. The pieces started falling into place. I found a message from Holly sent 2 weeks earlier. "Do you think Jason's having second thoughts? He's been acting kind of off. Probably just stressed, right?" She knew she was fishing for my reaction. I forwarded it to Derek. At the same time, he traced personal expenditures Margaret had funneled through the company's internal benefit fund. Nothing criminal, but if leaked, it could spell PR disaster. By day 4, Derek sent me the first draft of a formal legal notice to Jason and Margaret Ellison. It demanded full reimbursement of wedding expenses, $74,300, including deposits, last-minute cancellation fees, wardrobe, accessories, and media damage. Compensation for emotional distress caused by the deliberate bride replacement. A binding agreement that my name, image, or personal information could not be used in any marketing or public-facing material owned by Ellison West Capital. I read every line carefully. At the bottom was my signature and a note. "We propose a settlement within 7 days. After that, a civil suit will be filed in San Diego County Court." The next morning, I sat alone in my apartment, holding a now cold cup of coffee, staring out over the balcony. The maple leaves outside had begun to change, burnt orange and deep crimson, a sign of a new season. I didn't know how they'd respond. Jason might grovel, Margaret might counter with lawyers, Holly might vanish from the internet. But I knew one thing. This time, I wasn't going to lose. I didn't say anything publicly. No bitter status updates, no selfies with snarky captions. I vanished from social media as if I had never existed. But that was just the surface. Inside my tiny 7th-floor apartment, I created a new Reddit account. Just a string of meaningless characters. No avatar, no bio. I titled the post, "I was replaced at my own wedding, and no one stopped it." Then I started writing. Line by line, no dramatizing, no begging for sympathy, just the truth. The message from my future mother-in-law, my wedding dress taken, the venue canceled, my best friend wearing my custom gown and standing next to the man I had been engaged to for nearly 2 years. No names were mentioned. And I hit post. I thought the post would disappear like hundreds of other confessions on Reddit. But before 5 a.m. I got a notification. "Your post is being rapidly upvoted." By 8 o'clock, it was on Reddit's front page. By 10 in the morning, a major TikTok storytelling account began narrating it, with eerie background music. By noon, the hashtag Stolen Bride started trending on Twitter. A wedding blog with nearly 500,000 followers shared it, calling me the ghost bride. But the real explosion came 2 days later. An anonymous Instagram account, possibly a wedding guest, posted a photo, Holly standing next to Jason holding a bouquet, wearing the exact same Valentina Rose wedding dress I had commissioned to be made to measure. A one-of-a-kind gown, only one in existence. The caption read, "Wait, isn't this Claire Patterson's wedding dress?" And just like that, the veil dropped. Thousands of comments flooded in. "This is absolutely sick. Stealing her fiancé was one thing. Stealing the wedding dress too? Mother-in-law coordinate this? This is next-level nightmare fuel." The internet erupted. People began digging through Holly's tagged wedding photos. In one story clip, you could hear wedding music, see a 3-tier cake, guests toasting, and then, in the doorway, there I was, expressionless, wearing a black coat, phone in hand. A TikTok was stitched immediately, captioned, "The real bride walks in. Chills." The next morning, Margaret Ellison, apparently unable to handle the public pressure, issued a formal statement on LinkedIn. "The recent viral story is distorted and damaging to the reputation of our family. This is a private matter. An emotional exaggeration only causes harm to all parties involved." After she used the term emotional exaggeration, the internet did not let that slide. Popular creator instantly stitched the clip and said on video, "You stole someone's wedding, dressed your son's fiancé's best friend in her custom gown, and you call that a private matter? What is this? A casting call for final boss of mother-in-law horror? The comments blew up. Final boss of toxic mothers-in-law. Then came the leaked emails. Screenshots of exchanges between Margaret and Jason surfaced online. One line from Margaret read, "Claire isn't a good fit. She's too independent, too ambitious. Holly will be more cooperative." The word cooperative caught fire. A wedding blog broke it down. They weren't looking for a bride, they were hiring for a family role. Holly locked down all her social media within 3 days. Jason disabled comments on his Facebook. Wedding photos were deleted. The celebrating our big day post vanished without a trace. I didn't do a thing. I just sat in my apartment, watching the feed scroll like a raging river. Witnessing my story, this time unfiltered, untwisted. Finally being told. I didn't need to scream. The world was doing it for me. A week after Stolen Bride went viral, a formal legal notice was sent to the attorneys representing Jason Ellison and Mrs. Margaret Ellison. It stated clearly, full reimbursement of all expenses related to the intentionally cancelled wedding, plus emotional damages for the calculated act of replacing the bride without notice or agreement. We gave them 5 days to respond. No response came. On the 6th day, Derek filed a civil lawsuit with the San Diego County Court. They thought I wouldn't follow through. They assumed it would all fade in the whirlwind of social media. But once the subpoena was signed and the first hearing scheduled for the following Wednesday, the press picked up the story. Claire Patterson, the woman at the center of the Stolen Bride saga, files suit against Jason Ellison and his biological mother. Ellison West Capital faces potential PR fallout following wedding scandal. I showed up at court in a slate blue tailored suit, hair tied in a clean bun. Derek walked beside me holding a file nearly 2 inches thick. Inside were all the documents we'd assembled over the past month. The prenuptial agreement, venue invoices, original dress receipts, cost breakdowns, bank statements, Margaret's recorded message, and, most crucially, a sworn affidavit from Mia, my second bridesmaid. We entered the courtroom at 8:45 a.m. It was packed, reporters, law students, curious onlookers. Jason and Margaret sat at the defense table, Jason in a gray suit, pale as a ghost. Margaret calm, wearing sunglasses indoors, composed like she was attending a shareholder meeting. But when Judge Carolyn Blake entered and called the hearing to order, I saw Margaret subtly tug at her sleeve to cover her wrist where she usually wore her pearl bracelet. Derek began with a concise statement. All facts were laid out clearly. My client, Ms. Claire Patterson, entered into a prenuptial agreement with Mr. Jason Ellison, which includes a clause stating that if the wedding is unilaterally cancelled, the canceling party must reimburse all incurred expenses and may be held liable for reputational damage if there is evidence of deceitful intent. The plaintiff has submitted an audio recording in which Mrs. Margaret Ellison, the defendant's mother, actively intervenes directing the change of dress, venue, and even the bride. The judge nodded. Let me hear the recording. I looked up, Derek pressed play. We've taken the wedding dress. The venue is cancelled. Jason knows what's best, don't make a scene. Margaret's voice echoed through the silent courtroom. A few people turned to look at each other. Jason kept his head down. The judge turned her gaze to Mrs. Ellison. Do you deny that the voice in this recording is yours? Margaret swallowed. That was a personal exchange, it has no legal bearing. The judge raised an eyebrow. But it clearly shows a deliberate scheme to remove Ms. Patterson without formal notice. That is no longer a private matter. That is breach of contract. Derek proceeded to submit a sworn statement from Mia, the second bridesmaid, who had been approached by Margaret and told to stay silent if Claire unexpectedly showed up. Signature, date, notarized, undeniable. Jason finally spoke up, voice faint. I didn't think it would go this far. I just thought, if we stayed quiet, people would accept it. The judge cut him off. So you knowingly allowed the plaintiff to discover on her own that she had been replaced on the morning of her wedding. Jason said nothing. After 2 hours, the judge delivered a preliminary ruling. Based on the contract, evidence, and testimony, defendant Jason Ellison is ordered to reimburse the full cost of the wedding totaling $74,300. Additionally, the court will consider compensation for emotional damages if the plaintiff submits a supplemental claim with reasonable justification. I stayed silent. No need for defense, no need for dramatics. I looked straight ahead with the composure of someone who knew. The balance had shifted, and I now held the reins. 3 days after the hearing, the official website of Ellison West Capital quietly updated a brief notice in its internal news section. We announce that Mrs. Margaret Ellison will temporarily step back from all executive roles at Ellison West Capital to facilitate an internal review and strategic restructuring. The press called it a dishonorable retreat. An anonymous employee leaked an email to an investment blog. She didn't step down, the board forced her to. The internal divide got worse because too many clients threatened to terminate contracts. Online chatter began to swirl. Can a wedding scandal really take down a veteran businesswoman? And the answer was yes. Because in business, reputation is currency, and Margaret had just burned through 3 decades of credibility, all to cover up a bride swap. Jason didn't fare much better. After the hearing, he posted a short statement on LinkedIn. I take full responsibility. I've learned that silence is not protection. I hope to have a chance to start over. The post received over 10,000 angry reactions. The comment section turned into a public lashing. You weren't silent, you were complicit. Your fiancée didn't disappear, you replaced her. This isn't a lesson, it's a consequence. A venture capitalist who had previously worked with Jason commented bluntly. We've canceled a $2.8 million deal. We don't do business with people who choose betrayal as conflict resolution. Less than a week later, Jason was removed from a fintech startup he had co-founded. His name disappeared from the About Us page without explanation. And Holly? On Monday morning, the natural beauty brand Vertibloom released a public statement. We have terminated our partnership with Holly M. after verifying serious ethical violations. Our brand does not tolerate actions that betray Verta's core values: honesty, transparency, and social responsibility. All campaign photos featuring Holly were removed. Her PR team did not respond to any inquiries. Holly's Instagram account, which once had over 60,000 followers, now only displayed one thing: a bio line. Taking a break. No one had seen her since. Some said she had left the state and moved to a small town in Utah. Others claimed Holly was undergoing therapy. I didn't care. Mia, the bridesmaid who stood by me in court, sent me a brief message after the verdict was delivered. I'm sorry for not speaking up sooner. But if you ever need me to testify again, I'm ready. As for Rachel, the friend I used to be closest with who quietly exited our group chat after everything blew up, she moved to Chicago to work for another PR firm. She didn't message me. I didn't expect her to. We had chosen different paths. Clear. Final. Meanwhile, I received offers from 3 major PR firms in San Francisco. One wrote, "We don't just admire your crisis management skills, we respect how you maintained your dignity in the storm of media scrutiny." I didn't respond immediately. I wasn't ready to return to the grind. Not because I was afraid, but because I was savoring the stillness, the calm after the storm, when those who once manipulated the story had been forced to pay, one by one. 2 months after the trial, I left San Diego. I chose Portland, Oregon, a city not too unfamiliar, but different enough to breathe anew. My new apartment was on the 3rd floor of a small complex overlooking the Willamette River. Each morning, I'd open the window, let the cool, damp air drift into the kitchen, brew a cup of coffee, and watch little boats glide over the still water. I started a new job at Altara Strategy Group, a firm specializing in media crisis recovery for people caught in public storms, from artists, entrepreneurs, to victims of public shaming. I didn't apply, they reached out to me after the Ellison incident. The interview lasted exactly 15 minutes. The interviewer, an older woman with silver hair and razor-sharp eyes, asked, "Aren't you afraid of being labeled a famous victim?" I smiled. "I'm not a victim. I'm a smart survivor." I was hired the next day. No one at the company pries into my story. They respected the space I kept. But those who needed me, they found me. A woman named Diane, whose partner leaked private recordings online to ruin her reputation. A teacher named Maria falsely accused by a student and viciously attacked online. A young attorney whose ex-boyfriend leaked her personal photos and smeared her as mentally unstable. I met each of them in my small office, under soft yellow lights and surrounded by thick files on the table. I never opened with "What happened?" I always started with, "How far did they twist your story?" When they looked up with confusion in their eyes, I continued, "I know that feeling. But we're going to rewrite it from the start, the right way." One April afternoon, I received a small parcel with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter on cream-colored stationery, the handwriting slanted and familiar. "Mayor, you were right about everything. I only wanted something that didn't belong to me because I didn't believe I could create anything of value without taking it from someone else. I'm sorry." No signature, but I recognized Holly's handwriting. I didn't read it a second time. I folded the letter, placed it in the ashtray, and burned it. The smell of paper drifted into the kitchen. But it didn't linger, just a curl of smoke. Then, nothing. A few weeks later, I opened my secondary email inbox and saw a subject line, "Can we talk?" Sender, Jason Ellison. I didn't read the body. I scrolled down and hit block. They had taken part of my past, but they no longer had any right to the rest of it. I had never needed an apology, so I didn't need a clean ending either. During an internal meeting, Altarada's CEO said, "Claire, there's a women's media summit coming up in Seattle. Would you like to be listed as a keynote speaker?" I didn't answer right away. But that night I sat by the window and wrote the first 3 lines. Someone once said I was replaced, but they were wrong. I was reborn. The conference took place on a bright June morning at the Elliott Bay Hall Event Center in Seattle. I was invited as the keynote speaker for the final session, Reclaiming Power After Public Betrayal. Backstage, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of my cream-colored blazer. No dress, no veil, no bouquet in hand. Just a woman walking out of the wreckage she had once been buried under, and choosing to rebuild. The program coordinator leaned in and whispered, "You can tell the story however you like, no names, no details, just be you." I nodded. When I stepped onto the stage, the spotlight hit. The room held nearly 300 people, mostly women. They weren't loud, they weren't restless, just attentive, as if each of them was waiting to hear their own truth spoken aloud. I began with something very simple. I once had a clear plan for my life, and then, one morning in March, I realized I had been replaced. Not in someone's heart, but at my own wedding. I told it as a process of being blindsided by those closest to me. I didn't mention names. No Jason, no Margaret, no Holly. I didn't need them to be present for the story to carry weight. I spoke about the forced silence, about how women are pressured to let it go for the sake of appearances, while their dignity is stripped away. Some betrayals don't need weapons, they just need silence at the right moment, and a lie told to the right person. Then I talked about the legal journey. Not for revenge, but to make it known. I existed in my story. I wasn't erased. I spoke of social media, where people called me the ghost bride, though I had never been a shadow. And finally, I spoke of Portland, of mornings spent opening the window to the river, of the women I met, none of them famous, none with hashtags, but all surviving stories that others tried to silence. Some wiped away tears. Some gripped each other's hands, some just sat quietly, but I saw the light in their eyes. The kind that only flickers on when someone realizes they're not alone anymore. I closed with the sentence I had carried for months. I didn't need them to live a full life, they didn't destroy me, they simply freed me from a role I once believed was my destiny. That night, I sat alone in the hotel lobby, a glass of red wine in hand, light reflecting off the glass ceiling. A young woman, maybe just over 20, walked over. Her eyes shimmered but held strength. She said, "I've followed your story from the beginning. Today, seeing you up there, I realized I still have a chance to start over." I looked at her, gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't wait for a chance, you create one. The day you refuse to let someone else write your story, That's the day you begin your own chapter. She nodded, then walked away. I stayed for a while longer, not to dwell on the past, but to witness the present. The present I had reclaimed, piece by piece, with my own voice. Claire's story isn't just about surviving betrayal. It's a powerful reminder that you can lose everything: love, trust, dignity. But if you keep yourself, you still have everything that matters. In real life, many choose silence for the sake of peace, but sometimes silence means handing over your narrative to someone else. Claire didn't choose revenge, she chose to speak, to stand, and to rebuild. And that is the strongest, most lasting victory. What do you think about Claire's choice? If you were in her place, what would you have done? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family, choice, and rising above adversity.